Some of us are outwardly successful, but inwardly feel unhappy and living a life lacking in purpose and meaning. The Necktie and the Jaguar by Carl Greer can help you discover what's important to you and how to go for it. For more information or to purchase the book, visit carlgreer.com. That's CarlGreer.com. Welcome to What is Going Ohms, Transforming Your Destiny by Decoding Your Emotional DNA, in which hosts Sandie Sedgbeer and Judy Wilkins-Smith help you unravel and reframe the unconscious ancestral patterns that may be secretly limiting your success in life, love, finance, and career.
Hello. We all like to think of ourselves as unique. Individual sovereign beings with our own personalities, characteristics, talents, gifts, thoughts and feelings. We think we're in control of our lives and our destinies, and that if we make mistakes or fall short, well, clearly there's something wrong with us. We're not bright enough, or good enough, or lovable enough. Well, today and over the next 6 episodes in this exclusive new web series, you're going to learn that many of the recurring problems and difficulties you experience in life did not begin with you. The words you speak and the actions you take began in the bodies and the mouths and the experiences of your ancestors. The truth is, we all have greatness within us, and the only question that you have to answer is, how big are you willing to be? Joining me in this powerfully transformative series of conversational teachings is internationally renowned organizational, individual and family patterns expert, systemic coach, trainer and motivational speaker, Judy Wilkins-Smith. Judy, first, I have to thank you for agreeing to join us over the next 7 months to share this life-changing information. As the founder of System Dynamics for organizations and individuals, I know your expertise in decoding emotional and organizational DNA is in great demand with Fortune 500 executives, high-performance individuals, teams, therapists, and families looking to break through limiting cycles. So I just wanted to honor your generosity in gifting us your valuable time, your knowledge, and your expertise. And having read an advanced copy of your book and had several conversations with you, each of which has resulted in enormous personal ahas and breakthroughs for me, I truly believe that when it comes to personal development, your work stands head and shoulders above anything I've ever studied or practiced. For it doesn't just transform our own lives, it transforms the quantum field backwards and forwards in time, and in the process transforms the lives of our children and their children. So, let's begin. Just as our physical DNA is inherited, you say that our emotional genetics also get passed down through the generations. So, tell us about emotional DNA and systemic work and constellations.
Hi, Sandie. Thank you very much. It's lovely to be with you, and I'm honored to be with you all for the next 6 or 7 episodes. We're going to take this far and wide and as deep as we can. And yes, I think the thing that I love most about this work is everybody can do it. Everybody can do it. I'm often asked, what is systemic work and constellations and why is it important to me? It's important to you because I know that just about everybody wants a way to evolve and transform, and this powerful approach gives you exactly that. So if we look at systemic work very quickly, it's a body of work that looks at the entire system and its effects on you, its member. And the effects are vast and profound. The language and decisions that your system generates run your life. Constellations are the breakthrough tool that enable you to literally see, hear, feel, sense what's going on in your system. And by learning to dimensionalize your issues, you begin to see and interact with a world that used to be invisible. We're making literally the invisible world visible. So now you can see what's running your show. Now you can begin to understand what your emotional DNA is. So what is it? Your emotional DNA is what I call your pattern of thoughts, feelings, and actions. And as you so beautifully said at the beginning, it begins very often in the mouths and the bodies of your ancestors as they respond to events around them and create thoughts, feelings, decisions of their own. And this, of course, then becomes a pattern, which becomes a mindset, which becomes the truth. Only it's not the truth, it's your truth. And the most powerful thing is you can change that anytime you want to. And when you do, and you know how to, you do indeed change history and the future. And you're no longer repeating ancient history. You are free to create the future. So you look at your language, actions, and feelings, and you turn those into different patterns with one new thought, one new feeling, one new action, which means you're activating new neural networks and you're laying down new neural pathways. And so the way to think about that and to understand what I'm saying is, how do we inherit these pieces? Where did they come from? Started in generations long time ago. So I always say to people, write down your thoughts about something like money. And then sit down for a second and ask yourself, where did that come from? Is it really mine? Does it belong to me? Or is this what I was told to my mother, who was told by her mother, who was told by her mother? And now it's become truth. But is it the truth? And we begin to discover a fascinating world when we start to look at what we think is the truth. We suddenly realize that we've locked ourselves down. So the beautiful piece is that we act or interact in relationship or in accordance with those who came before us, or in reaction to those who came before us. And either way, your igniter is your primary pattern maker, which is your family system. So your family system is rich with all of the clues in the do's and the don'ts that allow you to begin creating the you that you want to be, not the you that you think you are. And so what I want to do is to look today at the three basic building blocks of what we call systemic work, which is, as you also pointed out, your code for cracking your own system. And I'm going to give them stepping stones to also do so that each one of you listening to this can become familiar with your own system. And here's the thing. If you have no knowledge of your system, simply look at your own life, your own thoughts, feelings, actions, and patterns, and they're going to lead you down the same path.
So this is true of everybody. We all grow up in systems. We all have this emotional DNA that creates a blueprint for us. So we aren't sovereign at all.
Not at all. I mean, we like to think so. But until you know what lives in your system, you're a little bit flying as blind as a bat. The beautiful piece about this is it's common sense, it's logical, but deeply transformative. So when people say, I want a way to transform, or I'm looking for transformation, this is it. This is an approach that will allow you to go all the way into what it is that has you stuck and take yourself all the way out of it and into a destiny rather than a fate.
So apart from freeing ourselves from this system and gaining sovereignty, what else do we gain from doing this work?
So here's the piece, by the way. You don't ever free yourself from the system. We never do. We have no intention of doing that. What you're doing is you're freeing yourself from the limitations that the system has. And the way you do that is to look at the events, the actions, the thoughts, the language, and the feelings that were generated by the system and understand what's trying to stop and what's trying to start. So at all times, you're looking at a pattern trying to rest and a pattern trying to emerge. What it does is it begins to give you the sense that you are not just doing a life. This life is an adventure, and it's a big adventure. It gives you insights into how you got here, why you're stuck. Shows you you're not created in a vacuum, and that you've got a long lineage of connection to the ones who came before you. And then it shows you your destiny. Because here's the piece you need to know. All the frustrations, limitations, sadnesses that you carry around with you are very likely tethered to the multi-generational family system of which you're a part. And your heart's desire, your deepest desire, your dreams, those are the pieces of you that the system is actually saying, please evolve, please evolve. That is your own voice. It's the thing that you were born to do. As improbable and as impossible as it may sound, that's your destiny. That's the path you're going to take once you learn this work.
So many people, and especially people who listen to this network and this show in particular, think that they are here to evolve their soul. What you're telling us is we're not just here to evolve our soul. There's a lot more to evolve.
Oh, absolutely. You are evolving your soul, but by doing so, what you do is you contribute to what we spoke about last time, which is the knowing field. In other words, the repository of all that was, has, and is. What comes from behind you, what lives around you. You're adding to that. And every time you add something different, even if you think it's just for you, you cannot help but change the pattern in the system. And the minute you change the pattern in the system, it's no longer just about you.
And we're doing this not only for ourselves, but we're doing it for our children too.
Absolutely.
Correct? Because if we don't do it, they'll repeat the patterns.
Exactly. If you don't do it, I get to see your kids 10 years down the line, and they will do what you didn't. Now, there is a tragedy around that, because what you want to notice is they can do it, but you're giving up the adventure when you do. You were born here to have that adventure. You were born to be big and to contribute. So you really don't want to give up your adventure. Plus, it is also it's part of who you are that adds to that system. So you want to ask yourself, how am I adding to the system? Am I repeating the pattern? Am I taking it down? Or am I stepping a step ahead? Am I doing that long walk to freedom? So it goes both ways. And once you begin to look at yourself and your history, what I often see is anger changes to compassion. Stubbornness changes to insight. Resolve dissolves. And so now, of course, your history is no longer the same either. Now the person who looked like the villain may just be that surprise hero. And now your future is possible.
Okay, well, before we start looking at how we can begin this work, just tell us a little bit about the science behind this.
Yeah, sure. So two things that it ties into very well are neuroscience and epigenetics. Mm-hmm. So with neuroscience, what we know is that the brain is neuroplastic. It was long thought that your thoughts were set in stone by a certain age. No, that's not true. Yay, sorry, busted. So your brain can do whatever it wants to. And this is powerful, because when you begin to teach your brain what you need it to know to serve you intentionally, you begin to change your world. The minute you plug in one new thought, one new feeling, one new action, and if you're smart, you accompany that with an elevated thought like gratitude, your world can literally no longer be the same. So we know that when you start elevating those emotions and focusing on what's right and what you want, you're going to take yourself in a very different direction. So that's the one. The other one is epigenetics. With epigenetics, we know that events can create an impact on an individual within a system so profound that the impact lasts way beyond the original affected member, and it echoes down through the system. And this is important, because if you've always been anxious, if you've always been sad, if you've always been angry, then what you're doing is you're very likely expressing the epigenetic imprint. And you want to pay attention, because you can change that. Physical DNA we can change, but not so easy. Emotional DNA is absolutely in your hands.
Right, okay. So you talk about the conscience of the system, and this is what we are here to expand. Explain to me what you mean by the conscience of the system.
Okay, so first, the conscience of the system is all of those unwritten do's and don'ts in your family system. Be quiet, don't be greedy, dress nicely, don't be a loudmouth, leaders aren't wanted, all the things that you were told as a kid growing up, right? All the things that told you the ways to belong in the system. Because the function of the conscience of a system is simply to get you to belong or to bond you to your system. That's its function. And we do perfectly dreadful things in good conscience, like, well, it's our side against theirs, let's go and take them out. In good conscience, we're operating within our system. We also do perfectly good things in bad conscience. So if you're doing something good in bad conscience, you know that if you go and date somebody from another faith, your mother's going to have a fit. Because you're now moving outside of the conscience. But the insight is you're not moving outside of the conscience, you're expanding it. And so the conscience is the do's and the don'ts, the pieces that keep you limited and stuck quite often, but it's also your area of expansion and potential. Because when you move, what I call moving beyond the conscience, again, you're not moving outside of it, you're moving beyond it and expanding it, it gives the rest of the system a bigger way to begin to interacting too. So when we look at a black sheep in the family, you want to look very carefully to see what it is they're bringing in that's very different to the way the family is and how that may make the family stronger. And in fact, you can actually see that in the UK, they often talk about bringing in somebody who is not of royal blood to strengthen the system. This is pretty much the same idea. You're bringing in a new idea, a new pattern, a new thought, a new feeling, and it's about to change the way that the system has been. So if for thousands of years in your family, everybody was very quiet and very acquiescent, and suddenly you walk in and you're entertainer of the year, it doesn't know what hit it, but it expands the system.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like new perspectives, isn't it? And stretching boundaries.
Very much. So anytime that you go, oh, I need to be quiet, you say, says who? Oh, I shouldn't be greedy. What is greedy? You know, I need to dress nicely. What does that look like? Because it's going to come along with all of the bits and pieces that Mum told you. Don't dress in gingham. Don't dress in white after Labor Day. Is that the truth? And is it current? And does it serve me now? Or am I being asked to just gently push, and sometimes not so gently, the conscience of the system so we can expand? And that's how growing happens, both within ourselves and in society. This is how we begin to expand society and include more members.
Okay, so you talk about there being natural orders and that there are 3, but you've actually made it 4 natural orders. Tell us about those.
I'm going to do that one thing very quickly because I know that people like something practical to do. So I just want to hop back quickly to the conscience of the system.
Okay.
Because there's a very nice little stepping stone that you could do right there. And that is just to write down one thing that you know you should do to be a good kid or a good girl or whatever it is. Write it down on a piece of paper, place it in front of you, and then what you want to do is stand and look at it and have one new thought, one new feeling, and take one new action and start moving towards that piece of paper. And you will hear yourself starting to speak all of those pieces of the system. And this begins to give you that embodied sense of what systems are like when they speak. So,
very true, very true. I mean, the minute you said that, I know what came to my mind. It was don't make waves.
There you go. Don't make waves. Now you put that down in front of you and start thinking about the one wave you're going to make, how it's going to feel, and the action you're going to take. And then start walking towards that piece of paper, and you're going to hear your own systemic blowback coming at you. which means you've got to really be willing and wanting to have that thing happen, because otherwise you will just subside again. It's a very interesting exercise to do. I do this whenever I have this little pop that comes up of fear that says, oh, you can't do that. I'm going, okay, let's have a look at that one. Says who?
Yeah.
Yes. So, if we flip around to your natural orders that you were talking about, these are overarching orders in a system that are deep, ancient truths that speak to the soul and exist in all systems. People hear the truth of them and feel the truth of them when we speak them. And yes, you're quite right, there are 3, but I have a 4th that I pull out, even though it's part of that, because it's so profound and people forget it all the time. So, the first one is that everybody has a right to belong. That means your dreadful Uncle Harry, your terrible Auntie Sally, the black sheep of the family, the ones who were incarcerated, also miscarriages, stillbirths, abortions, also adopted out, those who were lost, early deaths. They all have a right and a place to belong. So everybody has a right to belong. So that's number 1. Now, if we violate that for any reason, so if your right to belong is violated or broken for any reason or excluded for any reason whatsoever, here's the interesting piece. Somebody from a later generation will likely represent those patterns or the lifestyle that was excluded in order to draw attention to what's been lost in the system and bring it back into balance. And this is important because quite often you'll hear somebody say, oh, you're just like your Uncle Harry. Pay attention. What did Uncle Harry do that you do? How is that asking to change and be included so that you're no longer limited by it and you can move on? So that's number 1 and number 2. Number 3 is there is a ranking and role in all systems. In family systems, it's super easy. It goes from oldest to youngest. In other words, from great-great-grandparent to great-great-grandparent to grandparent to parent to child. It's that simple. And it's simply because that is the way that life flows. It's logical. Everything flows from one generation to the next. It doesn't make you bigger, badder, smarter, or anything else. It simply gives you your place. And your place is very important because you know from whom to receive and to whom you should pass on. And so life, love, success, fulfillment can flow naturally. When we step out of that, we begin to see problems. So those are the 3. And then the 4th one is anything that you exclude, anything or anyone that you exclude becomes a pattern in your system that expands and repeats. So we have Uncle Harry or Great Uncle Harry who drank a lot. Nobody talks about that because it was terrible. He nearly lost the house. Except that Dad drinks a lot and he's almost lost the house. And now you've come to see me because you have everything going for you. You love Dad and Grandpa, but you really don't want to belong in that way. And you're noticing that the brandy bottle's going down and you're drinking a lot. And so until we re-member Uncle Harry and give him his place, that pattern's going to keep echoing and getting louder and louder because it wants you to give that member their place in the system so that you're free of that place and you can go and create you. So those are our 4 natural orders. And when you're clear on those, they're so helpful because now you know how to begin operating. That is brick 1. And the stepping stone there, a really good one for you, is to go and sit down and write down all the members of your family. Look to see if there are missing ones, people you don't speak about, miscarriages, stillbirths, abortions, the adoptees, traumatic deaths, early deaths, and then step 2, the significant events in your life or lives of your family members, because those are the igniters of your decisions, your language, your actions. Those are the pieces that begin to shape who the system is and begin to set it in stone, waiting for someone to take up a thread and unlock that to create something bigger and better, always looking for thriving, not just surviving.
Well, tell me a little bit about this exclusion, because, you know, you've just given us a good example of that family, you know, where drinking seems to repeat itself in each generation. But how do you bring that person who was excluded back into the family? What are you actually doing? And how would you know, you know, that you've done that?
So,
if it's somebody who's deceased.
Right. If it's somebody who's deceased, what you do is you get a picture. Because what you are doing is you're bringing the essence, the memory, the echo of that person back. Now, this may sound odd, but if you think about some of the popular TV programs, the reality ones, where a host asks somebody about their mother, and she says, my mother died 20 years ago, and the tears still run. Mom is very much a presence. She may have gone 20 years ago. She is still a presence. So we know that that presence is always there. It has created the imprint on the family system. So what I tell people to do is to please go and get a photo. And if you don't have a photo, write the name and put it where you can see it. Now you're giving that person and that member a place in your system and in your heart, which means you no longer need to carry them on your back.
So you're talking about acknowledgement, aren't you? And, you know, in an energetic form, you are acknowledge them.
Absolutely.
And the energy changes. Well, what about an abortion or a miscarriage? You know, you don't have a photo of somebody like that.
You don't, but what you can do is something that symbolizes it. I usually will, when I'm working with somebody, I use footprints. And what I'll do is give them a teeny tiny set of footprints that they can hold. And it really is about giving that its place. Because if you don't, if there are children who are born after that, or even before that, it affects those children. There is an awareness in the system that something is missing. And instead of a child saying, I'm the firstborn, you can say to them, you're not, you're the second. And you will watch a change in that child.
Okay. We're going to go to break now, Judy, and when we come back, we're going to look at those 3 principles you talked about. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and you're listening to episode 1 in a powerfully transformative 7-episode web series co-created with internationally renowned organisational, individual and family patterns expert Judy Wilkins-Smith. We'll be back with more after the break.
The future of internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Vox Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Furman. Join me every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio for Vox Novus, the new voice.
Mental health. Most people think it means mental illness. Most people are wrong. Mental health doesn't apply to just some of us. It applies to everyone. We're all susceptible to anxiety and depression. They're human conditions, and no person should ever feel embarrassed, ashamed, or be discriminated against for being human. Cracked the podcast strips away the shame, fear, and stigma by expanding the conversation into areas less often visited. From brain and body chemistry, hormones, food, nutrition, trauma, and the microbiome, to pharmaceutical drugs, psychedelic substances, meditation, visionary experiences, and spiritual awakenings. Cracked the podcast will explore them all, including the notion that, for many, breakdown can be the beginning of breakthrough. For in the words of singer-songwriter Leonard Cohen, there is a crack in everything. It's where the light gets in. Cracked the podcast, Slaying the Dragons of Mental Health. Join co-hosts Sandie Sedgbeer and Rebecca Shaper on the first and third Thursday of every month at 12 noon Eastern Time.
Coping-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
If you're feeling increasingly lonely right now, you're not alone. It's totally normal. Even though we may not be able to get together in person, connecting virtually with friends and family still gives you a chance to interact with people and may help raise your spirits. Join a virtual book club, set up group text chats, or online video coffee breaks with coworkers.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
Welcome back to episode 1 of Transforming Your Destiny by Decoding Your Emotional DNA, co-created with internationally renowned organisational, individual and family patterns expert Judy Wilkins-Smith. Judy, let me just feed back to you what I heard you say, that by acknowledging, first of all, we have to become aware, then we have to acknowledge, and then in whatever symbolic way we feel is appropriate, we can actually demonstrate that acknowledgement and begin to break through some of those patterns, maybe to restore people who have been exiled in our lineage, or just acknowledge the people that have gone through some of these experiences that we're now repeating.
Yes, Anne, there's so much to what you just asked me. First of all, the acknowledging piece, absolutely. You're acknowledging that they belong. And when you acknowledge that they belong, you now have access to the wealth of information and clues they can provide. And they have all sorts of clues. They have clues to your limitation. They have clues to your success. So this is very important. Something else that's very important is to acknowledge the one who's been excluded exactly the way that they are. And this also, by the way, goes to acknowledging your parents exactly the way that they are. That doesn't mean you condone, it doesn't mean that that's wonderful. It's acknowledging that the way it is the way that it is. Because when you can do that, you are at ground zero, you're able to look at what's happening or happened, and you're able to go and create something from that. And from that flows a very systemic truth, and that is that your parents and your family are exactly the perfect family for you and parents. Because without them exactly the way that they are and were, you didn't get to be you exactly the way that you are and are becoming. You needed them to be the way they were so that you could be the way that you will.
Okay, before we talk about the 3 principles, can you give us a brief example from your casebook so that we can see how this plays out in real life?
Yes, I sure can. Somebody, I've spoken about this quite a bit, who came to see me, who was deeply embarrassed by the fact, I think I spoke about this before, that his parents were deaf-mute, who didn't want to be their voice and yet found himself becoming a world-class speaker because he took what was not a voice and acknowledged his parents exactly the way that they were, and then chose for his voice to be exactly the way that it was. So their not voice gave him a voice. And when we look...
Sorry,
go ahead.
Continue. No, please continue.
When we look at some of the things that look so difficult, when we come from difficult circumstances, when we come from abject poverty, your job was to move out of that. Your job was to walk the next step for those who couldn't. They put in place pieces for you to say, I do not want that to be me. They ignited a passion in you to go and do something profound. And that passion, if you'd have come from something mediocre, may never have come for you.
Well, what would happen if you don't have access to, if you're an orphan, if you don't have family, if you're adopted? How would you navigate this then?
Okay, so this is a question I'm asked often. What you want to do then is sit down and look at the places in your life that frustrate you the most, that you really don't understand, and you cannot begin to understand why this keeps plaguing you. It makes no sense, and it keeps you stuck and limited. It didn't come out of nowhere. That is a legacy that's echoing through to you. So what you want to do is look at your own patterns and then look at, what is the pattern trying to rest? I'm tired of always not having money. Where do you think that came from? Well, I don't have access to that information, but you know it comes from somewhere because it keeps hitting you. So what would you really like? I'd like to be super smart with money. Good. That's your step. You're now stepping out of the systemic piece that's got you limited and into the piece that is your legacy. It's got you tired and frustrated precisely to ignite the opposite in you, precisely to say to you, come on, go for it. Don't be that financial expert. And I cannot tell you the number of times people will then find the missing biological parents or the missing lineage and say, oh my goodness, exactly right. Everybody there struggled. Everybody there had these great events. I'm the one who can turn it around. So you're always sitting with your history and your destiny in your hands, even if you don't know where it comes from.
Okay. Well, tell us about the 3 principles now. You say that they can help us understand how to navigate the systemic world at a simple level.
Very much. And this is the kind of thing that you want to start doing as often as you possibly can. Once you get the hang of it, you're going to see that navigating in and out, broadly speaking, becomes quite easy. So you have 3 principles. Now, they're going to sound a little similar to the natural orders. So they flow from the natural orders into the principles. And we use these, by the way, Sandie, when we're doing a constellation. In other words, when we're dimensionalizing an issue, or when we're sitting down with pen and paper and exploring what has us stuck. So what you want to do is you want to take an issue that really, really bothers you and see which one of these categories it fits into, the broad category, because that's then going to tell you how to complete. So the 3 principles: belonging. We go back to that piece of belonging. Who belongs? How do I belong? Is my belonging serving me, or is it time for that to change? Everybody in my family is perhaps overweight or struggles with their heart. Is this a way I want to belong? Because we quite unconsciously belong to the way that we eat, the way that we act, the way that we are. So do I need to do something different? In our family, we're all really philanthropic. We're really strong artists. Do I want to belong to that? Yes, I'd like to. How do I enhance that? So belonging is the first one. Order is the second one, and order is my place. So belonging tells me where I belong. How I belong. Order tells us where we belong. In other words, am I the first, the second, the third? And this, again, very, very important. If you simply set up figurines or pieces of paper and you go, dad, mom, eldest brother, eldest sister, sibling, 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 you then put yourself in, you can see where you belong. But what you want to do is test, is that how I belong in my family? Or do I sometimes get too big? Mom and dad are fighting, I step in between. I have to take care of all the siblings. Or on the opposite end, my sibling ahead of me or my sibling below me needs a lot of attention. I will become very small. I'll become the good girl. I will lose some of my natural soul weight in order to fit in so that sibling can get the attention that they need. So we've got to be very careful about occupying our full place and only our full place. Because if you get too big and you're out of flow, you cannot receive the nurturing you need in order to pass it on. And if you're too small, you also can't receive what you need because you keep passing it on before it's flowed through you. So what we say is, when you know where you belong, you also know how you belong. So those two, belonging and order. And then balance of give and receive. And balance of give and receive is one that we know very quickly. If you are paid too much or paid too little, your body actually has a sense of that. You either feel cheated, or I will often find people who say, oh, I am paid obscene amounts. Listen to the word, obscene amounts. In other words, they're telling me it's too big for their bandwidth, and they give it away. So we keep operating within a bandwidth of the balance of give and receive. Ideally, with give and receive, you want to give much and receive much. This is the dynamic building that you do in relationships, in finances, in business, in family. But very often we are taught it's much more blessed to give than to receive. And we operate by that one as though it was the truth. The other truth is that when you are able to receive with joy, you make the person a part of your world, the one who is giving. You include them, you acknowledge the gift, you grow, and they grow. And now you want to do something for that person next time, who then wants to do something for you the next time. And so you begin to build this dynamic balance of give and receive. In organizations, you can often see where it's off, where you hear people say, oh my goodness, I'm on the clock 24/7. That is not a balance of give and receive. Or they may say, you know what, I'm on the clock 24/7, but I am so well compensated and taken care of, in which case there is balance. So what you want to do is any issue that you have, any issue, will fit into one of those three. So when you're sitting down, you sit down and you say to yourself, here's the issue. Which one of those three does it fit into? How is it affecting my belonging? How is it affecting my order? Is it affecting my balance of give and receive? What's off here? Because when you know what's off, you then know what you need to do to bring back balance. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And, you can bring back balance as far as you're concerned, but quite often you're upsetting the apple cart as far as everyone else in that system is concerned, because you're making them shift as well.
Well, here's the deal. I love that you asked that. People say, well, I can do all of this work and nobody else is going to shift. Here's the piece. The minute you bring a different pattern into the system, nothing can be the same. So, yeah, whether they like it or not, things are going to change.
Yeah. Okay. And you just got to deal with the fallout.
Well, here's what you want to do. I always say to people, when you're doing this, please don't go and verbally vomit on somebody else, and don't just go and slap them around the face. That's not bringing balance or order or belonging. When you have your insight, this is about you. And when you attend to your insight and your principle, your chances of hurting somebody else are not that good. I mean, yes, you're going to upset the apple cart. You are. But if you land your genius well, you can say what you need to, and it will land in a way that is acceptable. And if it is not, you may be working with what you call a meta pattern, a bigger pattern. The aim and the idea with all of this always is for you to grow in such a way that you are fulfilled and happy, not at the cost of everything else. However, it is going to change many things.
Let me just go back to, and what if we don't do this? I mean, you've already told us somebody else is going to continue that pattern. But when I was speaking to you yesterday, you said something about a terminal pattern. Tell me what that means. Where does it end?
Okay, so here's what may happen. We were talking about terminal patterns. I was actually talking about terminal families. Sometimes in a system, there is an event that's created all sorts of patterns in the family, and the family feels like it's dysfunctional, feels like it's limited, it can't go on, it keeps getting into messes, and you will get children who will say, I'm not having children. I'm stopping this. I don't want this to pass on. Conversely, if they step towards the pattern and they start to look at it and start to interact with it, they can then reframe a terminal pattern into a legacy pattern, which means instead of repeating the pattern, you're now evolving it into the gift it was meant to be. Because the one thing you need to remember is every single pattern and every single limitation has its other side. And when you reframe it, you're now beginning to speak the language of possibility rather than the language of what is. And the language of possibility is simply the future now.
Okay. So can you summarize for us some of the points that you've made so that we can take them away with us and work ourselves in a simple way on some of our own family issues and patterns between now and next month when you return?
Absolutely. So the way you want to do that is to first go, aha, I have a family and a transformational possibility here. And the first thing that you want to go or tell yourself is, my family is perfect for me exactly the way that it is. It contains all the ingredients I need to be able to see where I am stuck, how I am stuck, why I am stuck. Because once I can see that, they have just ignited in me the ability to turn around and create a destiny that says, here is my voice, this is how it will look, this is what I will add to the system. This is how I'm going to expand the system. So be aware, your family is your gift as you are its gift, no matter your family. So that's the first one. Then the next one is to look at, really pay attention to the language that you use, the feelings that you feel, the thoughts that you have. Start paying attention to those and begin to ask yourself, where did that come from? Because in the next episode, what we're going to look at is unconscious loyalties. And those are the other little things, along with systemic sentences, that run your show. So I want you to sit down and ask yourself things about, what do I think about money? What do I think about relationships? What do I think about all these different pieces? Where did that come from? Who did it belong to? Which of the natural orders may be out here, and which of the principles are involved? And then if I want to do something about it, what is the conscience of the system? In other words, what are the do's and don'ts that I'm likely to bump into? And then what one new thought, feeling, and action could I take that will expand me beyond the limitation now? And what is my deep heart's desire? If you can do that, we have a game.
Okay. Now, you say that these patterns, the emotional DNA, affects every single area of our life, our parenting, our relationships, with colleagues, with partners, whatever. But you also say that it can help us with leadership. Can you just expand on that a little bit? Because I'm not quite getting that one.
Okay, so the leadership one is actually a nice, easy one. There are several levels of leadership. The first 3 or so levels are all about becoming the expert, gaining weight, having that area of expertise, creating the right stakeholders, getting the right relationships, making sure that our basics are in. It's survival. We get to a point, or leaders get to a point where they go, there has got to be more to leadership than this. And they've just entered the transformational wheel. On the other side of that transformational wheel is, what is my voice as a leader? Who is my tribe? How will I serve? And rather than driving my people as I always have, how will I now invite them? And how am I going to be of global service? Who am I as a leader? Where did that come from in my family system? How am I going to develop that to evolve from a really good, smart leader to a visionary global leader?
And by leadership, I mean, you're also including somebody like a parent.
Totally including somebody like a parent. How do you lead? Do you lead from survival, or do you lead from thrival? Do you lead from driving your kids, or do you lead from inviting your kids? Who are you as a parent? Because that's what they're looking at to emulate once they become parents. What is it that you're passing on to your children that they will inherit and take into their own leadership as a parent?
So when you go into Fortune 500 companies and you're working with teams of executives, you're using exactly the same principles and tools that you would use, say, with a family, but you're just couching it in a different way, yes?
Absolutely, because guess what? Organizations have DNA too. Surprise, surprise. They're made up of people, and boy, do they have DNA too. And you better understand exactly what the dominant DNA is of the company, because if you don't, as a leader coming in, you're going to hit brick walls and wonder why. So if the dominant DNA of a company is we respect age, and you come in and go, I'm smart and new, you're going to hit a brick wall faster than you can count. But if you go to the age and say, you have experience, please share, you're going to get a very different reaction, because now you're playing within that system rules. And once you've given it its place, you can then bring in your new piece.
How do you change the dynamics, the loyalties, if you like, the conscience in a company that is not so open to change, that is a little bit toxic?
Well, it depends on what I'm asked to do. So it depends. It really does. You can do a top-down change, which is across the company, but quite often what I'm asked to do is work with a smaller team, and they will tell me we have no effect. Never, ever, ever true. They are actually the entrepreneurs of the company. If you work with that smaller team and they begin to understand their own head, heart, and gut, and they really start to function well, do you think that the rest of the organization is not going to look at them and say, I want some of what Sally's eating? So you just infect up.
You know, I think everybody wants transformation in some area of their lives, but change also is difficult to contemplate for many people. People are fearful of change. What do you say to someone who says, I really want to change, but I don't want to upset the apple cart?
I tell you what I say to them. I invite them to have a look at what will happen if they don't change, and then what they might contribute that would be profound for the system around them if they do. And then I just ask them one question. What are you costing the world if you don't?
There's a very spiritual element to this, isn't there? I mean, some people might not think so, especially corporations, but there is, yes, a deeply spiritual element here.
Yes. There is a lot of spirituality to this, because once you begin to see your ancient history and its wisdom and your own potential in the future, there is no way that you're not standing deep in spirit, deep in transformation, and totally in sacred.
So what you're basically doing is reframing circumstances, events, all kinds of things for people, so that they can see the gifts in it, they can see the doorway in it rather than the brick wall.
You know, there's a very simple analogy for that. You remember wine and water?
Mm-hmm.
All you're doing is learning to change water into wine. For the longest period of history, we've all been masters of turning wine into water, even champagne into water. We're simply reversing it and saying, now learn how to turn water into wine. It is part of your possibility language. We speak two languages, not possible and possible. We mostly speak not possible. That's how we were raised. But the other inherent and inherited part of your life is your possibility language. And once you begin to realize it exists and you begin to speak it, everything changes.
Well, to coin a phrase, I'll drink to that. Okay, Judy, so you were saying that next month we're going to be talking about loyalties. And what else did you say?
Well, I said we're going to look at unconscious loyalties.
Unconscious loyalties, yeah.
Yeah, so we need to remember that because it's our next stepping stone. I wanted these three first. And with the unconscious loyalty, we will revisit a little bit the systemic sentences and language because those two go together.
Right, okay. Well, before we close...
I think what we'll do is look at that through the lens of relationship DNA.
Relationship DNA. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, talking about relationships, you've got a course coming up soon in Texas in July. You've also got a 3-day course on emotional DNA. Would you like to tell our listeners about it? I'm sure some of them won't want to wait until next month, and they might be able to dive deeper sooner.
Absolutely. So actually I have one coming up pretty soon, June 11th through 13th, and that is the emotional DNA, where we deep dive into what that is, what it means, how you use it, how it affects you. It's your very basic building blocks, a little like today. And then the relationship DNA is moving out into, so how does all of that affect your relationships, both business and personal? And that one is July 16th through 18th. Now, it is in Texas, but it's actually going to be online. Our first in-person one will be the one at Disney in October.
Okay, so both of those, the emotional DNA and the relationship DNA, are online.
They're going to be online.
Yeah, which makes it a lot easier for most people.
Online, in person. Yeah.
Good. Okay, well, that's it for today, I think. I'll be back with you next week for a regular What Is Going On show.